So we're gonna have to agree on who's gonna lead the meeting today, and then at the next meeting, we can make the appointment of officers since it's our first personnel committee meeting. So I would say Wendy or Taps, any volunteers to guide us on today's agenda?
Oh. I guess I can take it because I'm here in the room.
Okay,
I nominate Chaps to chair our personnel committee.
All right, thanks.
Do
Do I have a second there? Thank you guys. Okay, so I'll call the, do we have a quorum? Yeah, we do, right? So I'll call the meeting to order. And can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Director Pedori,
Here.
Director Askew,
Here from Marina at the notice location on the agenda.
thank you. Director Burns, you have a quorum.
Okay. Thank you. Any public, I'm going to move on to section 3, public communications. Anybody that wants to speak on the public here, anybody that has joined the public here?
Show no one online.
All right, thank you. And we'll move on to item number 4, discussion/action. The first item is item 4.1, annual review of the personal committee bylaws.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, we have no recommendations from the council on changing any of the bylaws. They're appropriate as written. At this time, we just recommend that you guys receive the bylaws.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or comments? Because I do have at least one comment.
Sure.
Sorry, I'm trying to get my. Oh. So my question was, when I looked at the bylaws, especially Article 6, this personnel committee, in my opinion, but please correct me, this is my first time, is to deal with personnel matters primarily, because everything was listed by personnel. And I was just wondering, there's an item here, section 4.4, support for franchise collection planning. How does that relate to personnel matters?
Take that.
Yeah, I would say in short, good question. In short, I would say that it doesn't directly relate to personnel matters of ReGen Monterey. I think there has been some history of items appearing on the personnel committee that don't necessarily pertain to personnel, but that we want staff would like broader public discussion in the public at a committee meeting, so that when items come to the board, there's been more of a thorough review process by a majority of the board members. And I would say that would be up to the committee's bylaws and members to decide if we want to continue with past historical practices, or if that scope should be further defined. And
I was just gonna add that since we have legal counsel here, noting that the bylaws are in a certain framework, there's an article which actually says what we can or cannot do. What are your thoughts on this matter?
Yeah, well, I thank you for the question. I did notice a similar, there's a more expansive scope than what strictly seems to be employment or labor related matters. My impression is for things like, for example, the budget, that the personnel committee would focus on the portion of the budget that relates to labor and employment, right? So salaries and things like that. Similarly with the other topics, franchise collection planning or guiding principles, again, focusing on the personnel, labor, and employment related aspects of those items is how I would understand your bylaws in relation to what's presented before you.
Okay.
To focus on that. I think it would be fair for this committee to say that you would like to narrow your focus to things that are really specifically pertaining to personnel matters on a going forward basis.
Okay. Well, I'll just, maybe I can ask Felipe here too, but my view is that if you're somewhat broadening the scope here to say that other items are coming into play, which requires attention from everybody in all committees, that we perhaps look at the bylaws to tweak it to say it could kind of morph itself into other items too. But that's my thought, but anything that you.
I think it's appropriate. I think this is a way for us to Deborah's point is share those influences of the personnel on the larger subject and bringing awareness to them before we actually get to the board meeting. And so, again, the committees are not to take any action or to approve anything. It's to either receive and support recommendations that would be brought forward to the board. So I think it falls in line. And we will be extremely cautious whether personnel items are personnel. And if we extend, and we'd be happy to look at the bylaws and make a recommendation where we can maybe add a little sentence there and items like the budget, items that are expanded and have a feature of personnel in them. I think we can make that accommodation.
Okay,
Okay.
and typically, just for my edification, do these committees have like consent agendas or no?
No.
Okay, yeah, all right. Thank you.
Through the chair.
Supervisor, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess to the point, to the question, I had the similar question about what sort of constitutes placement on a personnel committee agenda, but under item F where it says other administrative review as needed. I guess that is fairly broad in its scope at the prerogative of our administrative team. So the things that are added to our agenda today would fall under broad administrative functions. Leaves us with some flexibility there. And then the other comment that I had, our officers for the committee, it does speak to a chair and a vice chair. Since we've just put you up as our chair, I'd be happy to step in as vice chair unless someone else is interested.
And Supervisor Askew, I would recommend that since the item isn't on the agenda for action today in terms of identifying a chair and a vice chair, that for today, you simply identify a person to facilitate the meeting. At the next personnel committee meeting, you could formally take action to nominate and elect your chair and vice chair.
Fantastic.
Okay, any other thoughts or comments? If not, we'll move on to the next item. This is just a receipt, right? Okay. So the next item is item 4.2 fiscal year 2026 final budget.
Thank you, Chair. At this time, we'd like to have Ellen Rodriguez present some of those items that we identified at our last board meeting when we were in our preliminary budget that have changed. And it's a 4-5 slide deck presentation that we'll go through, and then we can answer questions shortly after.
Just give us a minute to load up the presentation.
And just so that I'm clear too, for every item, are we going to public comment?
Yes.
Okay, so for item number 3, which was to do with the bylaws, are there any public comments? Okay, thank you. We'll continue with this item. Thank you.
Before I start, I just wanted to make sure that Supervisor Alcine, did you receive that email from Ida with the updated budget?
I do. I have the updated budget here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Ida, first slide. Sorry, I'm going for this. So the first slide here shows the rate increases as we discussed on the last board meeting. And so you can see there solid waste and construction and demolition debris is increasing by 5.2% from 77 to 81. Clean wood and residential organics are going from 47 to 49, which is a 4.3%. And then commercial organics is going from 67 to 69, 3.0%. In addition to that, the single stream recycling are going from $40 to $41. Next slide. So here is the summary of the budget. First of all, is the 5.2% increase in disposal fee rate. And the disposal fee rate, despite the rate going up, we had identified some regional volumes going down. So when we redid the budget, the revenue is actually decreasing 1.5% or by roughly, I believe it's $650,000 due to the volumes that we anticipate to reduce. And so that is 1.5% lower than the FY25 budget. And stop me if I'm just going through this. We'll get to the personnel issue in just a second, but this is the overall budget. The MRF revenue is increasing by 14.1%. It didn't change from the last projection. There was nothing there. The power revenue is decreasing 16.7%. However, we increased it by 300,000 based on our current run rate. And then, but the total revenue decreased 4% over fiscal 25 budget. Employment costs increased by 12.4%. Included in that is a estimated 3.5% when we first did the budget. We do not have the current CPI yet, which is anticipated to come out on May 15th, I believe. And right now, people are saying it's going to be about 2.5%. We don't know what that is yet. So as we go through and before the budget, hopefully we will have something. If not, the budget in its totality may be approved in June. However, the rate increase may be approved in May. So we can at least get that so that we can get a 30-day notice and get it approved in June, starting July 1st. Non-salary costs are increasing 13.7% over the fiscal year budget, 9.6% over the fiscal 24. Net income decreasing 69.6% and decreasing 21.8% from 24. Next slide. So here you can clearly see what changed from the board presentation on April 18th to today. Disposal fee, we reduced it by $1.6 million with the anticipated reduction in tonnage, plus the anticipated rate increase. The power sales, again, we increased this by 300,000. The current run rate is estimated to be 1.8 million, and we're anticipating it to be 1.5 as we start fixing some of our engines and stuff. The MRF revenue didn't change. The other sales didn't change. All in all, revenue was decreased by 1.3 million or 2.2% additional decrease. And that shows you that our total revenue is 575 greater than the prior year revenue by 1.0%. Operating expenses, there was no change to cost of employment. In this cost of employment, we have budgeted 139.5 FTEs, and inclusive of that, like I said, is the anticipated 3.5 pending the CPI, actual CPI coming out. Non-salary expenses, recycling services, that was increased based on our secondary review of our run rates for recycling, and that is the services that Keep Bay provides for us. And those were the only changes to the budget.
Just to add on the Keep Day that it's a positive net revenue item, so we see it as an expense item, but it also incurs a net positive revenue in our revenue line. Thanks, Sean.
Next slide, Evan. So here is the capital outlay. You can see we have 7,062,000 for mobile equipment and capital improvements. That was reduced by 1,125,000. We went through the list of all the projects and really scrubbed it. There are two projects that Felipe will be talking about in a few minutes. There's two of them, the CAS and the 21 kV, that we are going to go back and review that may change this budget between now and the time we get back to the board.
Yeah, and there's a few items with the CAS was the purchasing of the equipment, when that would occur, and how soon that would happen. So we'll make some changes to the capital improvements based on the CAS execution pieces, and then also the 21 kV. 21 kV has some particular components that may not arrive until March or April of next year. which could defer when we can start recognizing the revenue from sales of power over to Monterey One Water. Staff is already working with Monterey One Water on trying to find a viable solution so that we can connect power sooner than later. Essentially, they have a component that may not have the tolerance to make that connection now. It's a switchgear component, and they have to try to find whether that switchgear can hold the threshold that's desired of it, or would they have to wait until the permanent switchgear would arrive and be installed? So there is some dialogues going on. I think at the last meeting, David made it very clear, this is a Monterey One Water item, yet we're at the fence line, just as curious of how soon this could happen. For Monterey One Water, they get a revenue reduction in their expense. For us, we get an increased revenue from our power sales. So the like minds want to get together. Some of the thoughts around the fixes is additional cost from Monterey One Water. Yet we think they're just as excited as we are to get it online. So we're going to continue to work through those. But we would really like to isolate those numbers to realize them in this year if they're going to occur this year. If not, we'll defer them to next year.
Next slide item. So here is the cash position of the district. As you can see, we're ending with a positive cash flow of 32,693. The finance committee asked what the adjustments to cash flow, and those are non-cash items that are on the income loss from operations, the amortization and the disclosure, which are book entries, and they do not affect the cash position of the district. So we add those back. And so, next slide item. So here is the breakdown of the cash. We have a post-closure financial assurance with Cal Recycle is sitting at about 2.5 million, what the increase is about 250 per annum. It's based on the capacity that we fill. It's a percentage of the capacity every time we fill, it increases based on that. Then we have the board designated cash. We have the operating reserve, which is the 20% of operations. And then we have the post-closure reserve that was passed in 2022, I believe, or 23. And that increases $750,000 per annum for the next 10 years, the next 8 more years. And then it will be revisited. So what that post-closure reserve does is that in case we want to do a partial close, we cannot touch that financial assurance up there unless we do a full closure. So that is funds that we're going to be put aside in case we want to do a partial closure of a module or something. That's what that reserve is set up for. Then we have the capital infrastructure reserve, and that's based on a percentage of tenure per rolling tenure reserve for infrastructure, and as well as the capital equipment is for the equipment replacements on a rolling tenure. And so that we have total designated of 16,394, and as you're aware, that can be undesignated by the board should we need unrestricted cash for operations at any time. The only thing that cannot be undesignated or taken away is that financial assurance. So unrestricted cash ends up at 13.8 million. And again, our total in cash is 32.7 million. As you can see in the bottom, we have our debt ratio. We're going to meet our debt ratio covenants for the bonds, and which is at 1.25, and well meet those requirements. Next slide. This is a bar chart of the expenditures. As you can see, recycling services is our top expenditure, which is the 4.8 million, and as Felipe pointed out, it is a net income really from what we pay Keith and what we receive. And then the next highest level would be the repairs and maintenance, environmental services, operating supplies, all the way down to, and these are just showing the major items. So, and then the last slide that we have here is just the capital spend forecast that makes up the $5 million or $6 million. And that's it. So, during the last meeting, if you look at,
Just before you get into that section, Helen, I just, really our guiding principles have done a couple of things for us to really identify. We're looking to ramp up the revenue. We're looking, to ramp up our revenue and also our position on our bank dollars. So our dollars that we're putting away into our funds are gonna be equally as important. So knowing that those two are on the up and up, we're also looking to bring liability down. That's the additional AU payments that we're making, and then also our bond payments. So along the way to 2036 is to bring down our liabilities for the organization through those additional payments. And it was one of the influences that the finance committee gave us, is the more that we can contribute to those liabilities in the next few years is the reduction when we get to 2036, and less influences on liabilities and more to running day-to-day operations was a focus of theirs. Thanks, Al.
so, on your packet for the budget, your actual right up here, there is a section there with regards to the, human resources, which starts on page 3. Okay. So it talks about the amount of FTEs. So we are currently right now at 139 FTEs, and we're looking to increase that to 139 and a half FTEs. And that's on page 4.
And I want to bring an item up that was brought up in the finance department. And David, if you want to excuse yourself again, just be appropriate at this time. Item number, when you look at item number 3, Director of Engineering and Compliance, there was a lot of discussion in the last meeting as to why, and you know, what is the process to evaluate directors in their current role. And so the discussion went on and on. So I thought it would be important for us to highlight it. The thought around the increase for the Director of Engineering. It was brought up that what does the evaluation look like for all the directors? So I think Berta, if you could repeat some of the scenarios of how we're doing the current evaluation, what that process looks like, and then we can come back to this item still.
So directors are reviewed on an annual basis. There is a template, a form that the general manager completes. It includes leadership core competencies as well as a section for goals. And the way that the process is intended to work is the general manager completes the form. It's online in our HRS system, and he submits it for the individual to review it. And then there's a follow-up meeting that is scheduled with the general manager and that director to discuss or review that assessment. And it's also an opportunity to discuss goals and review prior year goals, updates and statuses. There is no, historically, the pay step review, or the pay steps are done on an annual basis. It doesn't necessarily align with the performance review process because performance reviews are done in June or July every year. Step increases are awarded on an annual basis on the employee's anniversary month. And so there is opportunity for the pay step to be withheld or delayed if the GM determines that there is a need for that or justification for it. And there's also, the general manager also has the discretion to advance a pay step should he wish to do so, and there's justification for that. there isn't a merit-based pay increase that we have built into our process, other than the COLAs and the step increases. So that's what that process looks like for the department directors' annual reviews.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm gonna expand a little bit more. I think what we heard was a couple of questions, and the last one was everybody being evaluated for a merit increase, and why only dated, was the question. And so I wanted clarity, and that's where I was at, in between meetings, was I wanted clarity of what that looked like for us coming. So the proposition I was put in there was, sure, that we do this evaluation for all the directors, that it's not isolated to any one director and only, at a request. So it's done annually, it's being evaluated, and that's really the chore of the general manager. But I asked what would substantiate the increase and what would that look like? So, they really wanted to see clarity that the directors were having this review. So knowing where they stand on an annual basis, what they do good, what they do bad, and where those improvements could be performed is usually the discussion. One of the suggestions that they made was just to evaluate his existing role and what was additional to that existing role on why the general manager is suggesting that 4% increase. And why that amount, right? I think initially it was more than that, but we can explain that a little bit. But I just really wanted to shed to light that there was a lot of discussion around this one merit increase and how was everybody else being evaluated and why this one position. So we're there now. I think I have a clear path of cleaning that up. One is demonstrating what we do annually, and then also applying any additional roles or sequences that may have been inherited through the change in roles and also the change in position where we're at as an organization. And I think that would help justify it. And so I just wanted to share that discussion. This is a pretty broad discussion on why and how come. Thank you.
Does that conclude the presentation?
That is all the presentation.
Yeah, okay.
We just wanted to make you aware of where we're at with the budget. And if you have any questions with regard to the questions that were brought up in the finance
Yes.
committee, perhaps.
Yeah, I just realized that I should have just asked questions to while they were saying instead of like leaving it at the end, so now I gotta jog my memory. But before I start, perhaps board member Askew, were there any comments or questions from your side?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess just to refresh again, and thank you for the review again on the budget. I know we've sort of reviewed the draft a couple times now, so it's always helpful to hear the information a few times. But on the question of our directors and the process by which we do annual reviews and step increases, and how those step increases are aligned to the annual reviews or not aligned directly, the discretion that falls under the general manager. And I know when we did our last negotiations with our labor for many of our employee groups, we did some salary studies. Can you remind me when the last salary studies that we did have been done for our management and director level positions? And I feel like we've could you just like walk me back through the timeline for those?
Sure. So the last study was completed in April of 2024. And the study included the review of classifications, of all classifications except for those that are in the allies unit, which are the entry level classifications, as their contract was not being negotiated last year. It included for study of salary and total comp, which includes the fully loaded compensation for each classification. And it also included the directors and general manager.
Okay, and we did make some adjustments at that point.
So Yes, I'm sorry. The experts who prepared the compensation study recommended making the market rate adjustments for any classification that was found to be below market. And the way that within market is defined, it is any classification that came in at -5 to +5, that window would be considered within market. And it also obviously recommended a phased-in approach for making those market rate adjustments for any classification that was, over several years period, depending on how low they were within market. And some classifications, they were able to find 10 comparator agencies, where others, they were not able to find 10 comparator agencies. So I think where we have 10, it's more solid than when there's less comparator
Okay.
agencies.
Thank you. And I remember that was a very comprehensive process. I really appreciated the way in which we went through the study process, and it was aligned with implementation in partnership with our labor partners. I think it was a really respectful process that I've reflected on in a number of other agencies that I sit with and realize, I think that it's a really good model that I've wanted to then bring back to a lot of other places where I think we could learn from what ReGen has done. So having said that, the next question, I guess, is in terms of from a policy standpoint, with our performance evaluation process that occurs between the general manager and the directors, do we have a written policy that outlines that process in the same way that we have well, I know next up we're going to be reviewing our process that the board uses to step by step go through our evaluation with our general manager. Is there a written process that outlines the general manager's review with directors and managers? And does it also go into any level of detail about step increases, discretion of the general manager, and merit increases as discretion of the general manager to provide merit increases when changing conditions might dictate that, as has been described in this particular situation?
So the employee handbook includes a general policy description for all performance reviews. And there are 3 types of performance reviews that are done here at ReGen. First one is a probationary period review, which is done mid-year or midway through the employee's first year if they're coming in new. And then there's the annual review, and then the general manager review. So the annual review is the same for all employees, and except for the general manager, as he has his own procedure, which you're going to review later today. But there is no specific mention in that policy in regards to, well, I take that back. The policy does make a reference to compensation being reviewed at that time. Find it. But it's very general, a very general statement. As I recall, the policy makes reference to the employee's pay step may be withheld or delayed if there is if there are concerns identified within that review process. But there is no mention about a merit increase. And we do have a separate policy that speaks to compensation, and what it addresses is the annual step increases. And within that policy, It includes a clause that allows for the general manager to advance a pay step increase at his discretion. So all of our classifications have 6 steps. Those are awarded on an annual basis based on employees' performance. That's the statement that's included in the handbook. And
Okay.
those are the 2 policies.
So I guess then the question would be, is there, and I think what I want to be supportive of is finding the right way to proceed so that we can have, recruitment and retention, recognizing that there are changing, positions, we have a changing agency, there are a number of factors that are at play. And pressures that are at play, but we also want to make sure that we have clear expectations and clear guidelines to follow. And so I guess the question would be, is there a need to look at those guidelines so that we are clear about what policies we're following when there might be a need to make adjustments as the adjustment that is being referenced is being made? Do we need to take a closer look at the policies so that we're really?
I think we do.
Yeah.
To answer your question, I think we could take a look at them. Unfortunately, I don't think that would be evaluated before we have to make a decision here.
Mhm.
But it could come with future decision that we incorporate language that describes what we want to do here in this scenario to make it more tangible and appropriate when we look at a policy that reflects a decision made by the general manager. So I think incorporating some language that has that ability to do that, again, we're gonna bring it to board and we're gonna get authorizations. It shouldn't be nothing that's not within the demand or the expectation of the employee.
Yeah, okay. I mean, because the other alternative would be if there are changing job duties, looking at a class and comp study, that if the job duties of a position have changed, the other alternative would be to go to a more comprehensive reclassification or reevaluation of a job description to identify what duties have changed that then would dictate a new class and comp, but that is a much more comprehensive, that in itself is an expensive process to undertake and undergo. So.
And I think your comment around the job description was where I got to with the last meeting, was really finding, take a look at the job description, see if anything has been added as a result of where we're at in today's business. So looking at that job duty to see if there's merit within the job description that has changed or that is occurring real time that merits the position was probably the easiest way and most inexpensive way to achieve the goal.
Got it. All right, thank you.
Well,
Okay, thank you. I'll just go through my questions now too. So I'm just going to go in reverse order based on how we spoke. So just, you mentioned that with respect to the position around the increase in pay for director, engineering and compliance. So has everything been sorted out? I mean, you mentioned there's a lot of discussion, but has it come to a happy medium or?
well, we're gonna bring it back to the board meeting, and then we're gonna present some of the justifications around that, and some of that would include their updated job description to see if there's anything inquired that shows the merit for the 4% increase.
Okay.
So that work will be performed between now and the board meeting itself.
But the result of that work need not be discussed here, correct? It's at the board level.
Correct. Well, it could be discussed here. We're kind of there at that point where what else would show that merit and justification for the proposed increase for the director of engineering.
Okay.
And really it was, is everybody getting evaluated? Does everybody know where their position is at and why these increases? And the best way to show that is in the job description of here's some things that might have increased or have added emphasis since is moved from senior engineer into the director of engineering. So
okay.
I think we have a clear path to achieve that for the next board.
Okay, very good. And then just from my understanding, she said that it's the annual step process, so technically the flow is have a performance evaluation and everything goes well with the evaluation, then at their anniversary date, they get a step increase. Is that
That's correct.
accurate?
Mhm.
Okay, and if for whatever reason performance doesn't go well, that step can not occur.
Correct.
And also for what you described, some of these steps may be in the policy, some may not be. I mean, steps are the general procedures, maybe in the policy. Some like advancement of a step is probably not in the policy.
That is in the policy. That's in the, not in the evaluation
Uh.
policy, but in the pay step policy.
It is there.
It is there.
Okay. Yes, I would say I would generally concur with what Member Rescue is saying. It's just while we're at the topic of doing whatever it is for engineering and compliance, let's take this opportunity to review more broadly how it's functioning for all the directors. And see if we can make things consistent, because I would expect everybody else to receive some similar treatment, so that hopefully it's equitable across the board is where I'm getting at. So, so if we can examine it, and I understand that there's a time crunch, you can't do it immediately, but I think as part of the personnel committee, this is something that we should look into. So, the other item I had was just from a budget standpoint, so this is, I had a question on the. So, I think this question is for you, Felipe, is, it appears to me that capital outlay for 25-26 has been reduced severely, like $7 million, and on average, $6 to $7 million. So what projects are we deferring in 25-26?
So we went to our priority projects first, which is 21 kV cast, and then alignment. So there was some deferred work on replacing the engines. But because we don't have a plan in the engine room, it may not be a good idea to just start replacing engines. I think we need to look at what do we want to do with our landfill gas opportunity. And if I just look on electric itself, we generate about 5 megawatts of electricity, but we're also flaring out about another 5 megawatts. So we're losing money opportunity there. So those capital weights are only so that we can develop a plan on, do we need 3 engines? Do we need 4 engines? Do we need 5? Do we go all out into power and maybe we run 8 engines? Or is it an RNG plan to go off ramp somewhere else? So those are some of the items that we deferred, was the immediate need to change out. We'll continue to rebuild and keep running and functional, but we want to devise a bigger plan to do more with our landfill gas opportunity that we have. I think when we look at the opportunity that lays in the revenue aspect of it, it could be anywhere between $2 and $3.5 million a year of added revenue if we do more with our landfill gas opportunity. So that's usually, that's where it's at. And then we add some MRF items like concrete that we want to lay that has extreme cost to it, but we're deferring and we're doing other methods like filling with asphalt for a shorter duration as we plan longer visions around it. So
Okay.
just really looking at the capacity that we can fulfill, and then also the immediate need for those to be executed now.
Okay, and the reason for my comment is, for how it was expressed in like the latter years, it looks like just for this year, we have like, capital outlay which is decreased by whatever, 5 to 6 million. And then for later years, it's all 10+ million. So the understanding is just for this year, we're only doing priority projects, deferring everything later.
And we'll look at the outlay every year as we approach it.
Okay.
What's feasible, what's not feasible. One of the items that I did identify was how we got to this additional money that we have in either designated cash or undesignated cash or restricted cash, was because we borrowed money from bonding that we did. So we got money in return. But I suspect that the reason for that revenue was to finish off capital projects that we desired to get completed. So one thing that we have to recognize as staff and as the board is that we're gonna dwindle down that excess cash, whether it's in designated or restricted cash or undesignated cash, those 3 items. But we're also seeing a few things happen at the same time that we're dwindling down that cash. Is our reserves are going up, our revenues are going up, and our liabilities will continue to come down. So it's part of the execution. And I think those additional years just need a little bit more time for staff to resolve what are gonna be those challenges in year 3, 4, and 5. Last year when we came to the board, capital was a concern as well. We had so many capital projects on there that it showed a 5-year trend that we would run out of our excess cash. But we have to then realize, again, we're doing a couple of things to bring up the reserve, bring down liability, and really balance out our economics for our organization. But it's really good.
Yeah, I think we're prioritizing increase of revenue through landfill gas.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. I think the question for you, in one of the slides you had like one of these, all these reserves amounts mentioned, and some of these reserves you cannot touch because they were related to closure items. Are all those reserve items accruing interest?
They are accruing interest, that is correct. Our cash is accruing interest. So we have cash that's pooled, and that interest is actually used for operations, if I'm correct. It's not reserved for that specific item.
Okay. And that's just like a, I don't know what the term is for it. So it's a late, yeah, is it late?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, great. All right, and then this is just an observation, but so I was just comparing the ratios of the debt ratio in page number 21, where the calculations are there. So I'm comparing page 7 and page 21. Then page 7 of the agenda packet, it lists the operating expenses as 55,000, I believe, 55,056. And in page 21, it says operating expenses 46,506. Obviously, it's 46 million versus 55 million.
So the difference there is the amortization and the closure post-closure costs, which are non-cash expenditures.
So
if you look at our operating expense, it includes amortization and depreciation and closure post-closure costs, which are book costs. They are not cash expenditures.
okay,
They're accrual costs.
okay,
So they don't affect the cash, and that's why you don't see that here on the debt service ratio, because this is based on cash.
so this is based on cash flow.
Yes.
Okay. But I was just wondering how that came to be, but I'm just trying to see, sorry. I would have asked all these questions earlier, I just got to this yesterday, sorry. I think we're good. I think at some point, I understand that there are unions and we have contracts with the unions for, like, if it's there online, I can grab those, but I would appreciate like somebody sending me those.
We will, and also, as we get introduced to our tablets in eScribe, we got Deborah access to eScribe, so a lot of our documents are there and accessible, like what's in our guiding principles, what's in certain items, so our agreements will be in there with the union as well.
Okay.
But we'll have Ida send those things over to you so that you can start accessing that information.
Thank you. And just one thought occurred to me, just from your comment, this is what happens, we need to try to pull everything. Do we have longevity pay
We
in
do,
there?
yes, so longevity pay was eliminated in 2020, a few years back.
Okay.
But it allowed for those long-term employees to be grandfathered in. So
Okay.
anyone hired, I believe it was prior to 2019, remains eligible for longevity pay. And that would be at 10 years, 2.5%, and at 15 years, 5% above their base. But anybody hired after 2019, longevity pay is no longer available.
And similarly, we'll have probably a mixture of folks in Pepper versus the legacy.
Yes, and that has, it used to be majority classic, minority Pepra. That has now changed, where with a lot of their long-term employees retiring after COVID, now we're a little bit slightly over on Pepra versus classic.
Okay, and some of that was impacted by early retirement as well, offered by the district.
Right. When, yeah.
Okay, That concludes my questions. Thank you for honoring these. Any other questions or comments from anybody? If not, any questions from the public? I don't see anyone. Is there any action to be taken for this item? Okay, so then. We'll move on to item number 4.3, General Manager Performance Review Procedure.
This, yeah,
Thank you, Director Minori. So the procedure before you was approved by the board of 2023 and then reviewed again in 2024. And the procedure as outlined is a two-part process for completing the general manager's performance review. Two-step process. The first step includes two parts. So it includes it's a data gathering. It includes feedback or input from whomever you decide you want to hear from. Could be, in the past, it's been the managers and supervisors and directors doing a peer assessment. And then also the self-assessment, which is completed by the general manager. The actual template that is used for providing that input is the same for both the self-assessment, the peer review, and the board members or the board review. So in the first, it's a 3-month process. In the first month, you're gathering data, or we're gathering data. In month 2, the general manager is presenting the board with his self-assessment, and at the same time, the board is receiving the peer review information. And then in month 3, once the board has reviewed the information that it was presented, then they are issuing or providing Felipe their general manager performance review. Each individual board member completes the template, the form, and then that is all of the information that is received is consolidated into one document, and that is what the board presents Felipe at month 3. The process also allows for compensation discussion, compensation review that occurs in closed session in month 3. And whatever decision or award the board decides to grant, that is then discussed in open session or shared in open session in month 3. And the timeline, I made the red line edits so that you can see what was changed from last year's process. And really the purpose of this presentation today is to give the Personnel Committee an opportunity to change or modify or ask questions about the process and decide what they want to do for this year.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from the board? Looks like there's none over there, and I go ahead.
Yeah, just say, Brenda, thank you for the great process. It's again a phenomenal process that I've taken with me to a number of other spaces where we've copied it and utilized this same process. So thank you, ReGen, for best practices that we've taken and used in other places. I know we're getting a little bit of a late start on this process, but I think that it's good to solicit all of the feedback that's outlined in the board approved process. I know last year we didn't get a lot of feedback from the sort of 360 process, and I know that that's not necessarily a common practice, but I think it's a really good practice, and I know that I've utilized, like I said, we've utilized it in other places, and it's been really valuable when when this sort of full circle has been willing to provide input and feedback. I think as a board, sometimes we spend sort of our one meeting, couple hours a month. We see what we see, we hear what we hear, but for the benefit of the agency and the agencies that we're representing, it is that one chance every year that we get to sort of bring everyone together and gather, just gather constructive feedback so that we can collectively, continuously have that culture of improvement and open communication. So I'll just go as far as we're drafting this out. I think that continuing to solicit the feedback from our internal stakeholder group of supervisors and managers would be beneficial. I'm looking at the form that we use, and I think I do want to make sure, how many, I'm looking at the chart too. And I think for supervisors and managers, I'm just trying to count how many people that is on the org chart. And I think I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I think there's 17 or 18 total. It's all managers, supervisors, and directors.
Okay, so I don't know if there's a way to incentivize or encourage people to provide their feedback. I think we only had 4 people submit feedback last year, which really isn't a lot, which can either be a really good thing or it can be a bad thing. It's unclear sometimes what, where that sits. So I'm not sure if those in the room can share thoughts about what we can do to incentivize people to provide feedback, or if offline you can share thoughts about what we can do to get people to share their thoughts. But the other thought that I had was for Felipe, as we think about the goals that we had laid out or that you had laid out for us this last year, if maybe there's some of those goals that we can put into or call out specifically in the form that goes out to the internal stakeholders, just to make sure that that form isn't, that it's a welcoming form. That's not, I think sometimes it looks like it's like, is this actually intended for me or is this intended for a board member? So maybe if we could just take another look at the form that goes out to the internal stakeholders to make sure that it's, we really do want feedback from them, and it's not just we're cut and pasting something that wasn't intended for internal folks back to everyone else. So just my quick thoughts on this. Thanks.
So for clarity, are you asking that you're asking to modify the actual template, the form for the internal stakeholders to include the goals that Felipe's goals from last year? So they could be, no?
So I think those are our goals for the board to have. Those are goals between the board and Felipe.
Okay.
But I think, just maybe looking at the form that goes out to solicit feedback. And if there's, it's like high level, hey, these are some of our broad goals. I guess I just don't know what the form looks like that we solicit feedback from our internal stakeholders.
It's the same form.
It's the same form.
Yeah, the same template that you see, that you review, and that Felipe completes in his self-assessment. It's attachment, what's the attachment number? It's included in your board packet, I believe, as attachment B.
Okay, so maybe then it's putting like a cover letter or something on it that is
Yes, so what I do is the form is sent to them electronically. It's a PDF, but it's a fillable PDF, so it allows them to type in and respond to all of the core competencies and then the free text at the back. I email it directly, and I think the first year, Felipe, you had sent the email asking for everybody to complete it anonymously. They type it up and they turn it into my mailbox upstairs without a name. I collate, receive all the information and forward it to the board chair and the vice chair. And then I consolidate it into one form and present it to the board during the second month of the process. So last year I did send out the email informing everybody that we're doing this again. please complete, and then I sent out several reminders asking them, please get this to me. So that's really the process. It might, I think to your point, in order to encourage more participation, because it is voluntary and it's intended to be anonymous, is to have Felipe send it out, email it, and encourage employees to provide that honest feedback. And hopefully we'll see a better response this year.
Thank you. Can I just tack on that, by asking, is this the same template that's used for employee director performance review too?
It's similar, but it's not the exact same. They both include leadership core competencies. They're slightly different for the general manager. And then the goal section in the back.
Okay. But I actually like this process. This is very, first of all, transparent, gives a lot of time to evaluate. Noting that there has been less feedback in the past, yeah, I would be open to seeing what we can do. I know in my company, for instance, private company, it's people actually say, you do yours, I'll do yours, something like this, like a quid pro quo kind of thing,
Yeah,
like
no.
that kind of item. But it's where everybody gets to evaluate, like it's a 360 performance on everybody, including your directs, including your managers, including your peers. So it goes across the board. So this is slightly different, like just from the structure of it. But ultimately, what I'm getting at is, it is helpful to get the feedback nonetheless, for many reasons. So if we can do anything to encourage that, I'll be supportive of that. It appears that you're going to be managing the entire process, correct? And the only comment I had was just maybe in step number 1. It says step number 8, we just mentioned that it looks like you were going to be doing it, but
Okay,
explicitly state that in there.
okay.
But otherwise, I'm good with it, and I wanted to, I haven't obviously done this here, so is the 2 weeks for the board good enough? I will leave that open, whether that's good enough or not. In the past, we've achieved that in 2 weeks, great. But if there's 17 odd folks all responding, and the GM inclusive is 18, I think the board should get some more time there. So anyway, I'll leave that open, but if this is coming to the board again for direction, look, we can tackle it at that point. Any other questions or comments? If not, I see nobody in public, so we'll just move on.
Yeah, I think 2 weeks for the board to get stuff back. I think that is, maybe a little tight, but I think if we might just have Kim call people to make sure they get that. If we could pass out the hard copy to the board at our meeting and then also send a digital copy, I think that's been helpful for TMZ. That was helpful. And then I sent emails to folks and then texted some people who weren't sending it back out. The other, and I don't know, Bert, I know we've always had you do it. I was just thinking at TMZ, we just went through the process and I'm board chair over there. We had our council be the one to collect it all. And I know we have new council. I'm not sure what's within our scope or allotted time. But is that something that it would allow Berta to then participate in a way that you haven't been able to participate? Is that,
Yeah.
is that within the scope of what we could ask for? I'm not quite sure. I don't know what our scope includes.
Well, as your general counsel, I can support in any way that makes sense. Of course, there's budget constraints, right? But I'm available to assist with in any way that's helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a discussion that was already happened. So Deborah and I agreed that if the board wanted Deborah to navigate the process, that would be an option for the board. I think all in all, at the end of the day, the amount of input is invaluable. So I've always been supportive of hearing from our employees to our staff, all the way to the board member. But the process has been developed. It's been used for 3 years. It's been helpful. It works. And so I just want to make sure that we continue to evaluate it. So whatever opportunities you guys feel you guys want to incorporate, I'm all for it. I don't have no position on what you guys should or should not do in an evaluation form for me.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think at the very least, if we just have things submitted to council and then, you know, either through this committee or through the chair, I want to volunteer Kim for things, but, I know in other places where I've been chair, that task of, sort of coalescing all the information, and, presenting it has fallen, in that seat. So, I think we can, I'm gonna volunteer our chair to work with our council, in that way, if that's something we can take off Berta's plate.
Okay, I will revise the procedure with your recommendations and changes, and then it'll be presented to the board with these changes.
Okay, I mean, if the committee agrees, of course, I not make these decisions.
Yeah, I think that when you mentioned that, I think that could have been one of the trigger points as to why we're not receiving feedback too.
Possibly.
So I think we should explore that option nonetheless and keeps it kind of neutral altogether.
Mhm.
And so I'm supportive of that.
Great, thank you.
Well, there's no public comments, so we're moving on to item 4.4. So we showed support for franchise collection plan.
Thank you, Director Baduri. Wanted to give an oral update on where we are with 2030 franchise contracts with Green Waste Recovery that are set to expire. So I'll give a little bit of history as it related to the last franchise selection process that happened for the 2015 agreements. And at that time, ReGen's board of directors was tasked the staff with evaluating district finances in an era of declining tonnages. It was just after the 2008 recession, and they had requested 2 tasks be done. One of them was to research alternative funding mechanisms for ReGen, and the second was to consider a consolidated competitive bid for franchise agreements. So that's how the 7-member agencies ended up coming together and working collectively. And in 2010, after receiving multiple bids, ReGen's board decided to work with HF&H consultants to manage those franchise agreements on behalf of the 7-member agencies for the current contract. And since then, HF&H has been providing consulting services directly to each of the cities for those contracts, ensuring that Green Waste is adhering to the collection agreements and meeting the needs of the jurisdictions. Historically, ReGen has absorbed those costs with HF&H, and I think it had to do with maybe the way that the item came to the board initially, or was generated by ReGen's board initially. But in 2002, SB 1383 kind of initiated more tasks that ReGen was doing on behalf of the many member agencies. So there was an MOU that was created to reimburse ReGen for costs that we were incurring, either staff time or consultant supported. And it was decided at that time that Green Waste Recovery contract compliance with HF&H was wrapped into that reimbursement agreement. So for the last couple of years, the member agencies have been supporting this task financially. In fiscal year 24, with 2030 on the horizon, ReGen staff, along with the member agency staff, through our technical advisory committee, decided that there were some more things that we wanted to learn about the existing agreement and the compliance with it. So we had tasked HF&H to perform a contract compliance checklist, which is basically just taking the whole, the large franchise agreement that looks like a big telephone book and distilling it down to something that's a little bit more manageable for staff to review. So they did that. And they also started monitoring the contract compliance in a way that they hadn't in the past, and developed a new reporting template to ensure consistency with the reporting out that Green Waste does. So fast forward to today, 2030 is on the horizon, and ReGen is again poised to support and assist the member agencies in this process. we have created a subgroup of our technical advisory committee specifically to address the franchise haulers selection process for 2030. And that consists of staff members from each of the member agencies without the haulers in the room. This is for 8 of our current member agencies, so it's everyone excluding the County of Monterey. The County of Monterey has extended their agreement with Waste Management. The 7 member agencies that are currently being served by Green Waste will come up for expiration, as will Monterey Disposal, who serves the city of Monterey. Their contracts are all aligned to expire in 2030. So on behalf of those 8 jurisdictions, ReGen solicited proposals from specialty agencies that provide these services. And we went out to 4 different agencies. We provided a scope of work for services to be provided leading up to 2030. We had initially requested that they provide a time and materials bid with that scope of work to outline how many hours they expected on each task for the 5-year period, as well as their hourly rate for each staff member. One of the proposers had requested an extension to May 15th, and we granted that to all of the proposers in fairness. So we now have a May 15th deadline. We're hoping to receive proposals that we can then bring to a subcommittee and a selection group of our subcommittee, which would be again, member agency staff to help review those proposals and make a recommendation to ReGen's board. So the intention is to just bring you all up to speed, but at our main meeting, what I'd like to do is put this on our agenda with 2 actions. One would be to allow the general manager to enter into an MOU with 8 member agencies to reimburse costs associated with the hiring of the franchise planning contractor. And the second one would be to sign an agreement with the requested or selected contractor. So that will be coming to the ReGen board likely in May. And once the selected contractor is in place, we'll be able to start work on determining the needs of the member agencies moving forward for the actual services provided by the hauler. So there'll be no fiscal impact to ReGen. These costs are again recouped by the MOU, or would be recouped by the MOU that we would generate. And I'll just note also, typically the consultant's costs are also reimbursed to the member agencies directly by a selected franchise service provider. So just say, for example, that we opted to continue with Green Waste Recovery. Typically, the contract would have a clause in it that would have reimbursement to the member agencies for the contractor that would be hired.
Okay.
So just wanted to provide an update on where we are. The process is getting started, but it's a 5-year runway to 2030. I'm happy to take any questions.
Sure. I will go out to our board member, ask you to see if there's anything on your side. If not, just from a timeline perspective, so this contractor will be there till we actually decide who the provider is.
Correct, yeah, that's the intention, and usually that happens typically about a year before the expiration date, because you have to have some sort of leeway to allow for transition for the new contractor, if there would be a new contractor to be in place.
And since we're bringing this item this month, so this contractor is going to be here for 4 years roughly.
Correct.
Okay, and so typically the contractor services are annual, or are they going to be annual, the costs?
I think what we're looking at with the MOU is to be billing
Time and materials.
time and materials on an annual basis. Yeah, there would be one set contract for the entire term that would encompass the entire scope of what we expected them to do. But ReGen would receive billing on a regular basis from the contractor, and we would bill out to the member agencies on an annual basis to recoup those costs.
All right, very good. Yeah, this is I would say just from my city standpoint, one of those things that always comes up is the cost of like how much it for waste collection services. So as we look into, we're well ahead of the curve here. So anything and everything that you do here will be appreciated. So thank you. Thank you for bringing this up and looking at it really proactively.
Yeah, and I'd like to just comment on your expectation on the cost, right? So as we get closer to rendering a decision on who we negotiate with, there's a couple aspects that we gotta really look at is your primary services, which is your curbside residential, commercial and industrial. And then you got ancillary services on that. And those ancillary services are usually what drive up your cost on your basic services. So we gotta pay attention to it. I think the focus is gonna be hearing what is working well for your municipality, what is not, and what are some of those expectations that may not be seen all the way through by the franchise hauler, and how do we hold them accountable? And that could be achieved by a new franchise hauler. It could be achieved by an amendment to the existing agreement and adding those provisions in there. Cost will be the biggest view that we have on it. We did see South County cities go out for bid, and we've seen proposals being rejected because they were about 150% more than the existing rate. So if we just look at it as sheer process and we go and look for a new hauler, we're probably gonna see increased rates. What we wanna do is look at where are the shortfalls on ancillary services that are important for this organization, for the municipalities, and how do we achieve it with minimal cost to the existing rate. So that's where we gotta be very comfortable. And we also have to hear from all the municipalities so that we can agree that that's the position we wanna take as a team, since this is a co-op in that franchise agreement.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and from what I understand, these are usually like long-term kind of contracts.
Yeah, traditionally, we had seen here in the region, 10-year agreements. And the last time we entered into the agreement with Green Waste Recoveries, it was for 15 years. It was something that was out of the traditional 10-year periods, and usually 10 years is used for capital investment. So you get 10 years to depreciate all the equipment and assets that you purchase to be within that 10-year agreement. It was very favorable when Green Waste pushed it out 15 years, because they said, we'll depreciate over 15 years and we'll keep vehicles running for in excess of 5 years of their normal lifetime, which then reduced the overall cost. So things of experience and things to look out for is exactly to your point, where are we on rate and where do we wind up with the new rate based on all the discussions and improvements, what we want to have. We gotta be cautious. We have Prop 218 items that could live in those agreements that are not being called out at this point. Some of them are the annual contributions that have nothing to do with solid waste collection that we would probably be looking at a little bit more as we round this year out and try to improve the franchise agreement. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other, looks like there's no more comments and there's nothing from the public either, so we'll move on to item 4.5. This is discuss board feedback to the revisions of guiding principles and guiding principles for acceptance of regional waste.
I'll take this one. I don't want to spend too much time on it. We did bring the preliminary guiding principles to the board for comment and feedback. Staff really dialogue back and forth on the feedback that we received was zero feedback from board members. So we want to bring it back to the board, send a message. Hopefully we can get more feedback and then give you guys a little bit more time to receive feedback. And the second option that we presented to the finance committee was just to receive the guiding principles as they are. And as we track this first year in those new guiding principles, we can see whether we need to come back to them and revisit them at the next budget period to align ourselves with our guiding principles and where the organization is headed in the future. So
Thank you.
just looking for more feedback there on the guiding principles.
Sure. Remember, ask you, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I guess the one question I have on the finance side, so I understand the member agency concern about wanting to maintain capacity for member agencies, and the member agency concern about how we've found ourselves in some situations where the way contracts have been lined up, where outside agencies with large long-term contracts have had at times lower rates than local tip fees. However, I'm curious if from the financial perspective, if what the thinking has been around the rate policies and the guiding principle. Like, is there a way to have guiding principles that define how we set long-term contracts that protect both the capacity for our future locally, while also, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not being very clear here, but the benefit of because there's some real benefits of having outside tonnage come into the district, and that is allowing us the benefit of economies of scale from a financial perspective. What is the thinking from some of our other board members around how we continue to benefit from economies of scale while also addressing these concerns that have been raised? Has there been conversation about that, I guess is my question.
So just in the last group, it was brought up by Chair Shirley on just, what is the resiliency we want to have? And so we have an 80 to 100% resiliency that we want to have. And she questioned the goal, don't we want to be 100% of resiliency? But because we're in agreements that are external past 2050, that we're gonna remain even after 2036 deadline, we're still gonna have about 24 to 25% external volume coming in. So the desire is to reduce it, but we gotta trek the road. We gotta make the hike. We gotta get to that point where we're realizing we're closer now to that 80% goal. Do we want to increase that to 90 and to 100? But the reality of it, we won't be able to get to 80% until we look at those 2050 agreements that we have open, that are external agreements exceeding the 2036 deadline. So the answer to your question is short. Yep, we're looking at it, but the reality is we're right here at this point in time where our business is about 48% external business currently right now. So we're just on the trajectory to reduce that. It'll get down to 24, 25%. And then we got to start looking at, okay, how much more do we want to do this? And then intentionally use those external contracts for objectives outside of normal operations. This has been the goal.
So what you just said, so it's the idea being that base operating costs, so the goal would be to get to base operating costs being 100% funded by ReGen partners. I feel like that's a really ambitious goal. And that's a fundamentally different approach than where ReGen has been for the past 50 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I may, I think when I looked at this item, and I have some comments, so at least initial comments, I'll pass them along. I mentioned a couple here. But as a government body, pseudo-government body like approach here, typically waste management services, the objective is for them to gain revenue. But in our case, it's not just revenue driven completely. So isn't this about sustainable waste management? Meaning an objective is to divert as much waste as possible before it comes to our facility here. And so my view is that we need to, from these guiding principles documents, set some county, and I guess you can't do county because they're not part of the member agency, but generally speaking, if you're setting some county-wide targets to say you need to meet certain, it's not like we're enforcing it, but at least suggesting that they meet certain targets for diversion at a certain jurisdictional level, then perhaps, and incentivize them to meet those targets. I think that's the direction I want to go with this, at least. I totally get the revenue aspect. And I think we're prioritizing landfill to gas and other initiatives to grow revenue. But more overall though, I think we need to look into to like sustainable waste management. Also, I found the guidelines to, if we're thinking in terms of like future, like 10, 15, 20 years out and filling up the capacity over here, we do need to have these guidelines document also address things that are emanating from this particular area itself, like we have odor complaints. I mean, at least there's some things related to odor and smell that come up. There are things related to what happens with the environment generally, so any kind of leachate management strategies, etc. I think we need to take an overall approach to see how these guidelines are to be built for every single aspect, rather than just an overarching guideline. Anyway, that's where I am with this. I would say just for the near term future though, I think the fact that we're primarily funded by an outside kind of operation here, that needs to continue in my opinion. We need to explore at least some solid kind of contract that keeps us engaged, which will allow us to kind of bring down the cost that we're looking for our member agencies. I'm saying a lot, but I'll pass on my comments that I have you. Anyway, I hope that all makes sense, but fundamentally, I think while we're on waste management, I think we're also in the government body. So we need to just put those balanced kind of approaches over here. Go ahead.
Comment that,
I don't know. Go ahead, member asking.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I just have to, like, I can only, appreciate your comments, Chaps, and your predecessor, representative from the city of Pacific Grove had, an absolutely opposite, point of view. And so I can just see the head spinning, around the table, as our poor staff from ReGen tries to, you know, be responsive to all of the feedback they get, from a changing, representative body. It's really hard to, just acknowledging how hard it must be. As as we have board members that change out with different perspectives. But no, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the insight. I didn't know that, obviously.
And some of it is because you're pretty new here, right? So you're seeing we're going through a transitional period. And I don't think at any given point, we're ready to be 100% solely reliable on member agencies, because that's not where we're at today in today's time. Right now, we're achieving to be resilient from those external contracts leading us, like we've seen with Watsonville. So the more of those that we have, the more vulnerable we are at the time that they decide we don't need your service no more. So those are some of the risk factors that we're looking to alleviate. I think part of the DNA for ReGen for a long time will be to still incorporate some external volume, but it's gonna be in a better bargaining position. So where we have bargained to get the credit position we wanted, was a AA credit position that we put ourselves when we locked ourselves into a 30-year agreement at $20 a ton for that San Jose volume, but it was a need for the organization. That need no longer exists, yet they didn't build a mechanism to get out of that agreement at the time that it expired. So we're learning along the way. It's gonna be a delicate balance. If we look at, I looked at, the Watsonville agreement, it was about $1.8 million, but it really resulted in, on an annual basis, of about 1.1 month of landfill savings. But then you multiply it by 10 years, it's 10 point, almost 11-year span of life savings. If you put that over 100 years, it was 30 years of life saving. So we're gonna have to put these attributes to the test for how much longevity do we wanna have there, but also how much resiliency do we wanna have from people walking away from the business because other opportunities are arising. So when people open up a new landfill module like Watsonville did, they are now in a bargaining position to say, I can take yours for less than what you're taking it to them for. So we're now starting to play this business position of who can give the best deal. So that's where we have to create the resiliency. How much of that do we want to gamble on? And how much do we want to be prepared for? And I think what we're doing right now is making that transition to have a significant portion of our waste management services not leave us at the moment that we lose some of the revenue associated with it. So we want to stay intact as people either go and as people come. So I don't see that you're that far off of the vision. Is we may need some of these external agreements, maybe for shorter periods of time, but with a designated result. I want to enter an agreement with the city of Ramos for 5 years. It'll generate $6 million. We need 5.8 to build MRF 3.0. So starting to realize that you do need them, but how are we gonna use them, and are we in the best bargaining position? I much rather enter into agreement where I'm receiving 95% of the gate rate, like all our customers are, than giving an enormous discount to somebody to continue to bring revenue here. So we wanna get that proportionate. So we wanna get those low volume entries into the facility close or equal to what the existing gate rate is for our members and everybody else. At some point, that bargaining position will get us to a point where maybe external customers are paying more than the member agencies, and for a long time, it's been opposite. Member agencies paying more than external customers. So there's a lot of history behind it. I don't feel like it'll be resolved in 1 year, but we are on the right paths of really looking at it from those various positions of why now and why do you feel like that it's a need? So we're gonna run into this scenario again as we start navigating other agreements that may be set to expire. And it'll come back to the board to, what do we wanna do? Do we wanna have this external volume support holding rate? Or do we wanna let it go and then have to increase rate at a faster rate? So I think everybody's on the right track, but some of it is, we've been working really, really hard to mitigate those exposures when agreements leave the organization, if there's no mechanism for it to off-ramp without impacting our current services. And the problem is, right now, those external volumes are supporting our daily services that we have. So if we just strip them away, we most likely will lose some of those services that we're providing to the community. Right.
Yeah, so it is like, it seems like there's a lot of things in motion at the same time, and doing one action may preclude another action.
It sure does. Yep.
We just need to carefully tread this. But I'm glad that we're actually examining both these. I mean, the documents themselves are something like 10+ years old, at least
20.
20. So yeah, I'm glad we're in this situation where we're looking into this. There was also some, I think it'll be beneficial for me at least, if, and this may already have been provided, but noting that the GBP revenue constitutes the bulk of the revenue component here, to get an understanding of the market for what competitive prices are, perhaps that's already done. Also, there's in the past, looks like the city of Salinas and maybe another organization were instrumental in these guidelines because they had certain components going through, whereas today they probably are in a different 20 years later, something else is driving the forces. And long story short, I'm gonna send my comments across and let's review it and we'll take it.
Sure. And on this item, again, was just asking for that. Could we receive more comments so we can really put this one away until we see a desire to change that profile of what the guiding principles are?
Okay, great. All right, any other comments? If not, I think I'll go to the next item, which is item 5, general manager communications.
I have none at this time. We do have some in the board packet itself, but I'll save those for board day.
Okay, noting that there are no public in the room or online, any further, so I'll go to section 6, discuss future agenda items. Anybody wishing to place a future agenda item or wish to talk about a future agenda item? Yes.
If I may, so at the June Personnel Committee, you've asked to review the policies, personnel policies related to compensation for directors or at-will employees. and also the performance review process.
Okay.
You want that at the June Personnel Committee meeting?
Also, the ones that we discussed today that you
Yes.
want to, is that enough time for you to come back? with-
Yeah. I'm just gonna share them with you so that
Okay.
you can look at them. I
Yeah.
might make some suggestions, but yeah, I can definitely do that.
Yeah,
with
then,
you.
yeah, let's go ahead with it.
Okay,
And again, like, the way things are going, some of these meetings are not happening, so let's just put it for June and we'll see where it goes.
okay.
Any other, questions or comments or future agenda items to be discussed?
What is the date for that next meeting? I just want to pull it up on my calendar.
It's, June 4th.
June 4th. Okay, perfect. Got it. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, if nothing else, then I'm adjourning the meeting at 12:40 PM.